We're ready to go. Okay.
Connolly, I'll start without you.
Hi, folks. Sons, daughter, grandchildren, hopefully great-grandchildren someday see this. We're gathered up here in our corporate office in Fremont, California, and we're discussing the old days and how our family tree started and what it's all about. I'm Grandpa John Connolly, born in 1935 in Oakland, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about our history. Today is, believe it or not, 2007, and I've been here 72 years, going strong, and we want to share a little of our family tree and history. We'll start going back to on the Connolly side. This is the family tree, and we start out with my grandparents. Well, one of them, Mike Connolly, came from Ireland, and that was when he was a young teenager, and ended up in, believe it or not, San Quentin. That's where his uncles were. They were plasters by trade, and he had come all the way from Ireland on a schooner and sailed from Ireland all around the Horn. And as you can see here, that was a trip that took close to 3 months. And his father came with him and his two brothers, and his grandfather was in an accident on the ship and smacked his head on a beam when they had rough seas, and poor guy was goofy after. So that didn't work out so well, but they did finally land in San Francisco, stayed on Angel Island. In those days you had to be quarantined. Thank you, Mike. And this is a map of Ireland where he started, and the boys have all been there, and this was in the county Cork. Cork was on the water there, and they had a plastering company, and they went contracted to get work over in San Francisco, or actually Marin County, and that was where they built, were building the prison, which is still going on there now, called San Quentin. Grandpa Mike, when he was 12, and they all moved and they lived in Marin County until he was 20 and moved out into Oakland. And there he met, at a young age, he met his future wife, Grace Mann. And Grace came from a upper class Irish family, and they were originally from Massachusetts. Her dad fought in the Civil War, of course, for the Union, and we have some of their family artifacts home now. It's silver service tray that kind of always keep in the family, and a tea set that were given to him as he was mustered out of the war then. They came over across country. That time the trains, they had the trains coming across, and they settled in Oakland. And then Mike Connolly and Grace Mann were married in 1900. Both were 22, and they had the next year a boy, and that was Walter, my father, and a girl a couple of years, 3 years later, and that was Lucille. And Lucille and Walter were raised in Oakland, and they were went to school there, and my dad went to St. Mary's for a while and hooked up with his cousin Quentin Reynolds, and they started a little grocery store in Oakland up on 20th and Broadway. This was a 5,000-foot building, at that time a pretty good sized store, and they had some money that was loaned to them by the Hagstrom family. They were also in the grocery business. They liked these two young men because they had worked for them as clerks when they were going to college at St. Mary's. And my father and Quentin started the store, and they called it Safeway. Believe it or not, Dad could have been whatever, but he and his cousin, who was a year older, Quentin Reynolds, Grace was his aunt, the two sisters lived across the street from the Connolly family, the Reynolds family, and the boys just didn't get along. So my dad got his original, after 18 months, his original investment of $500 back from the Safeway store of Quentin's, and went to work as a distributor salesman for Standard Oil, and had a territory in Fremont. Then it was called Washington Township, which we all know now as Fremont. And his sister Lucille went on to get through high school and went into Berkeley, Cal, and in her junior year she had the opportunity to work in San Francisco, taking the ferry boat every day for a new startup bank called Bank of America. And she was one of the 4 personal assistants to Giannini, who is the founder of Bank of America. So Lucille remained with him for 40-some years. And Walter is out here now in Washington Township, or Fremont area, and met my mother, Nyletta, or Nyla as everyone called her, Legue, and he met her in my grandfather's store. And actually they fell in love immediately, and gosh, dated through the junior and senior year at Cal, and shortly after married, and then they moved to Walnut Creek area there, and they built their home, which is now the Kaiser Hospital there on Newell Avenue. They had an acre there, a little over an acre actually, and right on the creek there, and then they sold that in 1940, and Walter took that money, which was $10,000. This is during the Depression. The war hadn't started yet, and bought in a partnership in Oakland with 2 other gentlemen, and started this meat company called Miller Meat, which is still going on today, 70 years later. And they have that going and make great sausages. You eat those jumbo, when you go to the Coliseum, children, you'll be eating those big Coliseums. You can think that your great-grandfather was founder of those. Yeah. And they sold that out, and then John came around, and he went through myself a little bit about my life. Hold that. I was raised here in Irvington, and we lived with my grandmother, who had built a lovely home, and my little brother Don, and my mother was a school teacher here in Fremont, and my dad opened a appliance and furniture store in 1945, and called Walter Connolly's Furniture, and it was very successful. And my mother then stopped teaching and helped him. I went to school here, grammar school, with my little brother Don, and then I left home, went to boarding school at age 13 in San Jose, called Bellarmine. And that's a Jesuit Christian school, and still a very fine school, with great sports programs and so forth. And went 4 years there as a boarder, lived there on campus, and played football in my junior, senior year. I was never a star, but I did get a block and had a lot of fun, and have made some great friends, and still keep in touch with some of them after 55 years. And then my brother went on to that school, and later, there were 7 years difference, and then when I went on to San Jose State for a year, had a great time, got into a fraternity, almost, it was a pocket pledge, but having such a good time, my grades were not what they should be. So under stress, I had to leave and go back to Santa Clara, which is just like going back to Bellarmine, the same teachers, in fact. It was Jesuits there. It was a small university at that time, about 800 students, boys, all guys. So all my buds were there, glad to see me back, and so I hung out there in 3 years, and met a gal at, was going to San Jose State in her second year there, went into her junior year, Beverly Bagley, and we met at a dance up at Castlewood Country Club, and I immediately was smitten by her beauty, and got her name and address, and by gosh, if I talked to her, six weeks later, we eloped to Reno, got married, and to surprise everybody because I was still in school. So anyway, it worked out. We came back and we settled in Irvington here, Irvington district of Fremont, and bought a home, a great house, $1,700 down, 17,500. Couldn't get 17 even, and had 2 fireplaces, a family room, living room, 3 bedrooms, and 2 baths, double garage, and some nice trees, fenced, and had a payment in 1957, or actually it was 58, the year after, 125 a month. That was 125 a month, and I thought that was a lot. Of course, I was only making 600 a month, so that was part of the.
Is that house still standing?
House still there. It's worth about, Tony, one of Steve's manager, lives in a home similar to it. He said that they go between 750 to 800,000. And
We can give you an exact evaluation, Dad, if you
yeah,
want.
Tom is a broker here, working with his brother and Mike, and they do a lot of appraisals, so they'll give me. But that just goes to show you how in 50 years, how something can, that is just 50 years. So anyway, then we got married, and we had 4 children, and Janie and Mike and Steve. Can we see that?
Yeah.
And they can do that. I'll point it out here. We got this nice special sword. I love to say this came from the old side, but we really got this in Poland when Linda, my wife, were on a trip. Over here, John married Bev, and then later, of course, married my present wife, Linda, the love of my life. And we have Janie, is my firstborn, and she came along a year after married, and then Mike came the next year, and then we had we had, tried to keep it about 11 months apart, then we had Steve and Tom. So we had 4 kids in less than 4 years. And we're very fortunate to, my grandfather had left me a little ranch. In fact, he had, when he passed on in 1940, he had 44 little farms in Fremont. And he worked with the bank, and he did a lot of foreclosures. And now I see Tom here, very similar, going into those foreclosures. But he would take these over, and he would give people credit. And when they didn't pay in his grocery store, then he'd have to, after a year or so, take them over. This is Grandpa Ed Hirsch, and my dog George, the big
St. Bernard.
St. Bernard, right. Thank you, Tom. And here I am, little Humpty Dumpty, age 3 there, 3.5. They're in the backyard of their house, which is just across the street from our store here in our shopping center, and that's in the backyard. So anyway,
Grandpa, mine was, you were 5 when he passed away?
when Ed Hirsch passed away.
Oh, okay.
Ed Hirsch. So anyway, then on this side over here is Tom. This is my grandmother, and her mother brought a picture of her, believe it or not, and this was in the mid-1880s, and Grandma, I have to look at a note here, she was born in 84, and this was in 1880, she was married to Fred Riley, and they opened a very successful bakery, and that was in Santa Clara. And my grandmother was 13. The dad passed away with, they call it baker's asthma, you know, breathing in the baker's dust and so forth. This was right across the school from the university there in Santa Clara. And my grandmother and her sister and brother went away to orphanages, because in those days people didn't have insurance and it was tough. So when she got out of school, she was 18, and she met a little smoothie, I guess he was, because they also got married quickly, eloped, and that was Peter Legue. And he had come from Holland. He was a Dutch Huguenot, and his brother was a doctor in San Jose, and he went on to live in San Francisco.
Excuse me, Dad, did Big Ma come and visit at the orphanage?
Big Ma, yeah, she would, evidently she did. She was operating a boarding house here in Union City, which was at that time the capital of Alameda County. And her sister knew shorthand, and a fella came in and liked her and so forth, and he liked the good food that Big Ma, as they was commonly called, Big Ma's boarding house, asked her to be his personal assistant, and that was went on to be the governor, Earl Warren. He was the district attorney of Alameda County, and that was the county seat. So then she followed him into Oakland, and then she married, and he wanted her to come up to work with him when he was at the state capitol. He was also our governor for 8 years, but they kept in close contact, but she never did go up. Anyway, then her brother Fred was a policeman in Oakland, and Fred Riley, and he was shot in a gun battle in a bar. He was a detective, a sergeant, and had 7 bullets in him. These were 22 bullets, so the French Shriner automatic gun. It was like a pistol. It looked like something like a Thompson, some machine gun, but it was in a pistol size. Took 7 slugs, lived 7 years, and had the biggest funeral they remember in history in Oakland. I remember they all marched down, the boys in blue, down Broadway.
Permanently disabled?
Permanently, yeah. He got his lungs, he was punctured. He couldn't sleep. He had a recliner chair. In fact, it was a lazy boy that my dad gave him there, and had to stay. This happened in the late 40s. And he died. I was in high school, so I would have been 15, 16 at that time. So then that kind of gives the family there. We have on the other side also over here, when after Walter married, then they had Don, married Beverly, then later Linda and Tom. So you can see the Connolly family tree, that they all came. So basically we're on this side of the family, the Connolly family, we're Irishmen. And never
Top of the
forget.
morning to you.
I'd be proud of that.
So Grace Mann was from Ireland, Dad? Was she Irish?
Grace Mann? No, she was from Massachusetts. And her father was also from Massachusetts. Grace Mann.
Okay.
They're Irish, they were Irish descent,
I see.
but they didn't come from Ireland. The only one that came was Mike Connolly.
Was full Irish?
Full, yeah, full. I mean, well, they're full, but I mean, it's just not watered down. So on our side, the Connollys, my blood would all be, except my mother over here, and that's not, because has that French Huguenot, so she was half. So I'd be
half.
3/4 Irish.
I see.
So then we have, that's fine, Tom, thank you. And this gives you a little picture of Estelle, the family tree. She was a very pretty lady, very capable woman, and very made things happen. And
No nonsense.
no nonsense. As I get older, I appreciate her. When I was growing up, she was a toughie. But God bless her, I love her, and I think about her now. Yeah. And here's a nice picture. Maybe Steve could show a close-up. That was my 65th birthday, and we did a nice birthday up in San Francisco. And maybe you can see on the wall here, we have a picture there. That was our 60th birthday when the grandkids were little. There was up there were 5 of them. Now there's 9, and everybody. That was up at Castlewood area there. Here's a picture here of our little family and Hunter. They're hunting now, and they've got
Get the bird.
Chris,
Get the
and-
bird.
And now Cody's getting into it, getting the birds, and this was taken back in '05, and that was the last time we had his last hunt. And you know all about that. I guess that's kind of winds up.
Tell us a little bit about the retail end of it, where Still was part of the grocery store, I guess the general store.
Yeah, here in Fremont, it was an area that was growing. It was primarily farming, and then after World War II, the subdivisions started coming in, all these GIs coming in and buying homes with little to nothing down, and it was a big boom. So my father did well in that. My grandmother had a grocery store for 39 years, working with her husband, Ed Hirsch, and on his death, she sold it and to Chinese fellas, and they took it over, and she retired. God, she needed it, but she did travel, did a lot during the war, World War II. Grandma Hirsch worked on the USO and was commissioned to by Eleanor Roosevelt, went back on a train to Washington D.C. and was honored with the citizen of the whatever they called him at that time, and did a lot of things. I remember World War, the war was over in 49, they had the United Nations, and that had their first meeting here in San Francisco, and she was on a delegation to take the wives of these
World leaders.
to show them the Bay Area. And at that time, she always drove nice cars, Chryslers and so forth, because also Hirsch had been a distributor for Dodge Chrysler cars. Grandma would, sell cars. They sold everything. He was incidentally of Jewish descent. His father had come from Berlin, and he was a real merchant. And well, anyway, this was Madame Chiang Kai-shek, and her husband, Generalissimo, was the leader. That was when they called it Formosa, and he had come over from mainland China, which now you know is Taiwan. And they came to our house in Fremont, and I'm a young guy, and I'm looking at this beautiful Chinese lady, and she spoke perfect English. In fact, she was a graduate of Mills College in Oakland, and she was very educated. I'll never forget, we had a nice visit and so forth, and she invited me to come to China. I should have taken her up on that, but I was only 15, and so anyway, that was a story I just wanted to tell you about. There's a lot of people that my parents knew that became really quite famous, and just because of, acquaintances, hardworking people. And in those days, another one to bring up, when I was going to high school, the fifth highest salaried executive, CEO in America, was a fellow that my dad was starting this little startup company with called Safeway. And he was the executive, and his salary in 1951, I'll never forget this, was $500,000 a year. I mean, that's a lot of money now in this year of 2007, but back in then, I mean, it was mind-boggling, and that was with his bonus and so forth. And at my dad's funeral, I'll never forget, I went up to Quentin and I said, "Oh, what do you think, Quentin, if Walter had stayed with you at Safeway?" And he said, "John, you notice my three sons aren't with Safeway. One's a lawyer, one's a realtor, and one is a stockbroker in San Francisco, but none of them had gone into their business." But I liked the retail myself, and I was glad that Steve, my son, second born, took the baton, and 25 years later, believe it or not, it's still going on. And hopefully my firstborn grandson will be interested, and he'll take that baton and carry it on too. So
Did Ed Hirsch, Dad, sell furniture before?
he sold everything, yeah. In his store, he sold furniture. He would have pictures, catalogs, and we would take people up to Oakland to a showroom and show them the furniture there. And his cars the same way. His car would be his personal car. take orders for it. People, he didn't have really a car showroom per se. He sold everything from Bulldogs to Dodge Chandler cars, Chryslers later on. I mean, he was a merchant, and anyway, it's
Now, the building next to the brick building, which was a hardware store.
that was another one of his brothers, and that was brother and sister ran that.
Hirsch.
And they had the Bill Hirsch Hardware, and Lily Wilheimer, that was she had married a wealthy Jewish fella, and he had all the property that is now Moffett Field, and they had sold that in the pre-war, and that's when they built these big, they call them blimps now, but in the old days they were called dirigibles, these big inflated balloons, and they built these big hangars for them. And so that's about...
How about the Irvington Monument, Dad? That's a nice story behind that.
Good question, Tom. That was a monument. It was built, dedicated to the 14 boys from Washington Township that were killed in World War I. In those days, a lot of deaths were there. They would get mustard gas and die from lung disease, and or from the aftermath of the gases. And it was 14 guys, and my mother and her cousins, the little Hirsch girls, there was 4 little cousins, and my mother, they put on a dance, and they had a skating rink, and it was called the Maple Hall. And they put this dance on, and my mother was played the piano, and her cousins would have these little ukuleles, and they'd put on, they would sing, and they put this little dance on, and they raised $119. And with that money, they had a cement guy, my grandfather from Oakland, came down, and they had electric lights in it at that time, and they put lights in it, and they made this, he plastered this, donated his time and stuff to making a monument. It's up here on the corner of Bay Street and Fremont Boulevard to this day. They did all that for $119.
What a deal. Now, question you have to ask, Dad, the real skinny on the township of Irvington, the origination of the name. You've heard so many different stories.
Washington Township, well, for a long time, there was cousins and so forth. I mean, Irvington? No, that was Joseph Hirsch. We had always said it was part of Irvington because I was kind of proud of that. And
It was named after the famous author at the time, Washington Irving.
it was named, actually,
According to the
yeah, to the
history
book
of it.
there. Yeah, and then the Southern Pacific made a mistake on it. But as kids, I would say, well, yeah, Hirschtown, but because everything in this town was Hirsch's. I said, well, just call it Irvingtown, that's the town. So I kind of left it, but I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, because it really is,
Get that factual.
it was a little, not factual exactly. But this town was, Hirsch did have the 4 brothers, and they all were merchants and had the hardware store, and the feed store. One was in the plumbing business, another was in the real estate, and one had the local, he was the black sheep, had the pool hall and bar, and he was usually found there. And that's Alan Hirsch's dad. And then he had a sister, and that was kind of it there. But they were all hardworking people, and it was great. I had great memories, and my son's here, and my sons and grandsons and granddaughters, and great-grandchildren. Hopefully, this tape's still around. You'd be proud. They were great people, great people. Okay, I guess that's a wrap.
Any questions, guys?
Unless anybody has a question. Tom, do you have anything?
Just a point of interest that Stanford University was a coin toss from being here in Fremont
Up
as
in
opposed
Mission,
to
San Jose.
the Stanford, Palo Alto, California. And
Yeah.
Leland Stanford's wife at the time said, well, I think I like the weather a little bit better in Palo Alto.
Because their son was
There.
asthmatic, and they would just thought the weather be better there, and
You also mentioned, Dad, that Grandpa Walter started taking Nyla to church because he had a strong
oh yeah,
family.
yeah, they were. Actually, my grandmother, being she had been divorced, even a very good woman, was not at that time church going, and in 1940, when her husband died, she became went back into the Catholic Church and was very active in the church parish up at Mission San Jose. And when my mother married my dad in the middle 20s, she converted back to Catholicism and got very active in the church and led the choir for many years in Mission San Jose, 2 masses a Sunday that she would play the organ, sing, had a choir practice, and they did a lot for the church. They were very active in it. And then my dad and some local men here in this area, in the Irvington district, got together and they went house to house collecting money, literally from collecting it in bags, and I was with them too, knocking on doors, and we raised a down payment. We got the land for almost nothing from a Jesuit priest that was like family to us, Father Copeland, on Copeland Lane, and we put in the church. In fact, Steve Connolly went to the school for a year there. They have a grammar school, and that's St.
Raymond's.
Leonard's.
Leonard, thank you.
Remember Grandma Hirsch had a patent leather purse with a pair of white gloves and a candy bar. When I was a little kid, I remember her, if I wasn't good at church, she would take the candy bar at the end of church and hand it to the little boy next to me.
Oh.
Right over my sniffing nose.
That's
Hirsch.
great. No, she was
Nonsense.
a specialist. Gosh, I can tell you, go on with many stories about her, but she was, I guess now, more than ever, she was my hero. And I'm so fortunate that I married somebody just like her. And Linda is just remarkable. I mean, I wouldn't be here today talking to you folks if it wasn't for her. I really mean that. She came into my life 25 years ago last week, and 25 years we met. And she's just been great, and a great grandmother too to the kids, and they just love her. And she is, she's my rock. And anyway.
Do with your sword, Dad, one last one. There's no business like show business?
Yeah, this is a story that's not, I use this as a pointer. We got this in one of our many trips. I've been privileged to have traveled to 59 countries, and this came from out of Poland, believe it or not, and it was in a castle, and everything's for sale. I did a negotiation card, this little
You
skrilla.
can bring that home now. You have to
Oh, I
ship it.
know, to bring it home. In fact, it was so cute. I took this sword, I took a bathrobe that I had, and I took the belt off of it. It was a red sash. I put it across my chest. I took this sword, had my dinner jacket on, and I had all these medals. We'd also been in Russia, in St. Petersburg, and pinned these medals on the deal. And I come into the dinner with this sword and those medals with this sash, and the sash around my waist. And
All the ladies are saying, whoa.
and this is, and then I do the bow and so forth. And this is at the captain's dinner, the special deal on the ship. And everybody is looking, who is that? I didn't know he was royalty. And I put on this accent.
The last of the czars.
Yeah, the last of the czars. Anyway, well, it's been fun, and I wish you all a happy holiday, and I love you. God bless you guys. That's a wrap.
Love you all.
Love you all.
I had a little side bet that Dad would say that.
Oh, you have to have the side bet.